Let's start with you providing us an assessment of the performance of that sector in the year 2023. If you look at the estimated worth of that sector is over $140 billion. Talk to us in your own estimation. How will you rate the performance and the activities that trade that sector in the year 2023?
All right. In my own view, 2023, as you all know, there were a lot of challenges ranging from economical, political insecurity. But in all that, there is the construction industry or construction sector experienced a great advancement or growth in terms of a contribution to economy, taking Nigeria as a case study. Construction industry is one of the most important and relevant industry of today that has great impact on any nation's economy. It plays a vital role. Construction company or construction sector plays a very vital, pivotal role in any nation's building, economically, infrastructure, and otherwise. So, despite the challenges that the nation faces in terms of the monetary policy, the politics or change in government, most especially the money scarcity that affected the construction industry, like every other sector of the Nigerian economy, we were able to record a maximum growth in the East industry, because no nation can actually do without the construction company, because every aspect of Nigerian economy, taking Nigeria as a case study, rely on construction industry, ranging from the transportation, housing, in terms of real estate, the power sector, starting from generation to transmission to distribution. It relies on constructions. It relies on engineers, starting from maybe structural engineer, mechanical engineer, production engineer, chemical engineer, electrical, electronics. So in all this, the construction sector have been able to give a facelift to Nigeria economy, contributing 10.7% of the total GDP of Nigeria's economy, which is equivalent to 11.1 trillion naira. You can imagine that. So the importance of the construction sector can never be overemphasized. So we are advancing, and we hope in time to come we will be able to contribute more.
Yeah, as we hope that more contributions will be gotten from the construction sector, let's look at some of the projects that were executed in this year. Now, in this year, we also saw the Lagos-Ibadan Railway project done, the completion of the second Niger Bridge, and we've seen also the completion of the Dangote refinery. Now, these are major projects, but on the whole, the big players versus the small players, how was it in the year 2023?
Yeah, it was fantastic, so to say, despite the numerous challenges. It was fantastic. We have been able to achieve, the construction sector have been able to achieve a lot of success despite the constraint. So the project, the aforementioned project, like you said, was done with the help and the assistance that is synergies in relevant sector in the construction industry. Like I earlier mentioned, the construction sector has a lot of components. So, let's take the refinery, for instance. The refinery have behaved, the building or the successful completion of the refinery have been able to contribute to the growth of Nigeria economy, not just in the aspect of producing or refining oil, as the case may be, but starting from the construction from the scratch, the aspect of employment. You have, for instance, structural engineers, you have petrochemical engineers, you have your electrical, electronics, you have your civil engineers, you have your production engineer, and it was able to give wide reach to the extent of unskilled workers, you know. And for every Nigerian every country to move forward, such as Nigeria, you also need high level of employment. And the construction industry is one of the most the large employers of labor when it comes to any country, because it cuts across all sectors. So the projects were very massive. Some have been completed. Some of the projects are still ongoing. And more, the government are also looking forward, because for a construction sector industry to actually play its role in any nation's economy, it has to do with the synergy between the government and the private sector. Because most of these projects undergone by the industry is either a government-owned project or the business sectors that will employ the services of engineers or the services of construction company to undertake these very large projects that tend to stabilize the nation's economy by way of giving development in terms of infrastructure. Like I mentioned earlier, when you are looking at the constructing our roads, you are looking at building our hospitals, residential building, even in the agricultural sector. So in all sectors of Nigeria economy, the construction company or the construction industry play a very crucial role that can not be emphasized. So 2023 that is gradually sliding, we have achieved a high level of success, and we have contributed immensely to the growth, development, and advancement of Nigeria, economically, infrastructure, and otherwise. So it was a great year for us as a people, personally as an engineer.
All right.
So in your assessment, how much of growth did we see in terms of capacity for the local construction companies? Now, for some of the projects that I mentioned, this is a massive project that usually you will find them being contracted to foreign construction companies or very big construction companies. So how much of capacity do you think that the local construction companies have built to be able to take on some of this project? How much of this big project did they take on in this year?
All right, in assessment, I would say it was a very high or huge success. I cannot go by way of rating percentage now. Then talking about multinational and the local construction companies as it were, they all have their roles that they play. There are some projects that can be undertaken by the multinationals, and there are projects that can also be undertaken by the local construction companies. At times, they work simultaneously. If you want to just oppose the entire sector, there are times, for instance, if we are undertaking such a massive project like the massive construction, like the refinery, Dangote refinery, for instance. You have expatriates. There are some aspects that the expatriate or the multinationals will take care of, and as such, some circumstances, some sections or segments of this construction will also be sublet by the local constructional company domiciled in that environment, as the case may be. So most of our projects here have been undertaken by our local construction companies. There are times, like I said, the multinationals will take a very massive or big project and we design and also sublet to local content and oversee or supervise the construction. There are other areas in terms of food supply, material supply. For instance, the Dangote refinery, that is a case study here, encompasses the whole construction sector. The civil engineer, there will be water supply, there will be limestone, like the granite supply, there will be road and several other things. So the multinational that probably the contract was awarded to cannot 100% oversee or rather take charge in terms of this other aspect. So they are crucial area they take charge, and also sublet some of those supplies and some of those construction, which they also know that some of those local company or local content have the capacity to also run, as the case may be.
All right. One of the things that also shaped the year 2023 is the political transition that happened in February, which also necessitated changing the Minister of Works. You now have Dave Umaya as the Minister of Works, who came up with the idea of, using concrete for road construction instead of asphalt. I'd like to have your take on this, how the development has gone over the year, for the year 2023. What do you think has been the impact of this on road construction for the contractors and also for the nation as well?
All right. Government or governance as it were, is continuum. There is no vacuum in governance or in government. The only challenge that we have as a nation is policies and its implementation. So, yes, the election process, the campaign, the transition, most especially the aspect of the cash crunch, the money policy, the money scarcity and all that, it actually had an adverse effect on the construction industry and the Nigerian economy and at large. But now we have another administration. We have seen some policies. We have seen some implementation of policies that is seen as a beacon of hope to the industry coming 2024. And not just the construction industry, likewise in every other sector. But you will agree with me that most especially the last part or section of the previous administration, a lot of projects were left unattended to. In most cases, contractors are not mobilized or paid to either continue or complete the projects they have initiated. So when this administration came on board, they have been able to also review some of those projects that we abandoned over the time, and with the quest to see how it can be sustained and completed. So with what we are seeing, despite the changes in the administration in terms of the key offices, or like the ministers and all that, like I said, it continues. So what we expect those coming into office or that came into office to do is to continue from where the previous administrations stopped and come up with policies that will enhance the smooth operation and development of this industry and the Nigeria economy at large, because it is the government policies that determine or that create an enabling environment for construction industry and like every other sector to strive and to succeed in its operations.
My initial question is like a two-in-one. I also wanted you to react to the idea of using concrete instead of asphalt for road construction as introduced by the present minister, Engineer Dave Umari. What's your reaction to that, or your take on that?
All right, it's not out of place at all. Either you are using asphalt or concrete. Let me tell you how it works. Because with my experience in the construction industry, ranging from pipeline construction to civil and every other segment of construction, it has rules of engagement. For instance, if the government wants to engage in road construction, it's subject to discussion, it's subject to carrying out tests by the engineers or the construction company, to carry out tests to know the kind of construction that will be suitable for such road or infrastructure development. The minister cannot just sit in his office in Abuja, for instance, and say, "Oh, Bini Abraka Road, I want asphalt or I want concrete." No, it is not done like that. He has his own opinion. The government has his own opinion or his own proposed design. But the government, like I said earlier, it's partnership. The government, as it will have their own professionals, engineers. Likewise, the company that is undertaking the construction. What happened is this: the parties sit together. It's of critical stakeholders in the industry, where you have the structurer, depending on the what's so called, depending on the project that is being undertaken. Sometimes you have your surveyors, you have all professionals coming together to design the project and come up with a resolution on the kind or the type of materials that should be used. So it's not going to be in entirety, like you said, like to say, oh, all the road is Nigeria henceforth is going to be constructed with concrete. It cannot. It's not possible. When it's feasible, when it's doable, we use that approach. And when the asphalt is also advisable or feasible, it will also be applicable.
All right, let's look at regulation. In the course of the year, some fatal accidents were witnessed. I'm talking about building collapse, poorly constructed work or poorly done work. What should be the approach towards regulation, and what do you think were the failings of the regulatory authority to curb things like that?
All right, like the construction industry, like locus classicus, taking an engineer, petrochemical, or a quality control engineer, it's a very stringent a sector that requires a very tough or stringent policies, regulatory policies. And over time, we know the Nigeria state as it is, sometimes corruption creeps in. You now see a situation whereby those are supposed to ensure a very strict regulation or compliance to these policies that regulates the sector to somewhat compromise by those who are saddled with the responsibility to ensure that a 100% compliance. But you also agree with me that the collapse of failed construction recorded in 2023 is very minimal. It's still very little compared to the previous year. So there, in all, there is an advancement, and we hope that government and the company, because if you go to construction company, you will see a very stringent rules and regulation. That's not to say there are no lapses, or there are some companies who does not also adhere to these policies provided. Because it's only in construction industry that I have seen, starting from the safety of the personnel, the equipment, and the environment is put into consideration. So there are, I know there are times you also have the material defects or the equipment defect, or perhaps human failure that could lead to the collapse or defect in construction. But I will assure you that, so the little I know about in the industry, there are stringent rules and regulations being put in place to ensure some of these disadvantages of negativity recorded, the few recorded, is totally eradicated. And the government on its own also have a major role to play to ensure a total compliance. And to also add to that, some of these lapses or faith in construction that your collapse, as you said, is most often to be associated with some of these local content around the quacks, because most actually the civil aspects of construction industry, where you see most of our living houses. I can tell you for free that 70 to 80% of our housing estates or our residential buildings are being undertaken by quacks that to an extent are not regulated. You know, I think government needs to also look at that aspect, whereby an individual will wake up and will say, oh, I am a skilled worker in this aspect. I can undertake to build a house, to build an estate or housing without compliance to the rules and regulation and without the supervision of the professionals. I think this is the aspect that the government will need to look at. If you go out of this country to other society, you don't see an individual waking up to say, yes, you just call messes and just bring some persons together, you start construction. In other places, you have a well-constituted organizations or companies that undertake any form of construction. That as a carpenter, as maybe Messi, that is often referred to bricklayer, you have to go through an institution to render your service to the construction company. You have to be certified. You have to be employed by a company. or an institution or organization for you to render your service. But Nigeria as it were, an individual can just wake up and go to the site and start building house or doing construction as a case may be. But that is not applicable to some of those government projects.